King out at malls across America. This was the scene in Manchester, Connecticut yesterday. Several people arrested there, and police had to break up a brawl at a mall in Ohio. Witnesses described the chaos there.
Running, screaming. I seen a girl get trumbled over. Like it was scary. It was really scary for real.
We just saw some cops running towards the food court, and then eventually a little bit after that, people running the opposite way. So we didn't know what was going on.
Well, that mall was placed on lockdown for a while. Scenes like this lit up social media. There is no word on what might have sparked this trend.
Well, tensions are growing between the United States and Israel after that UN Security Council vote condemning the Jewish state with its settlements and declaring those settlements and the continued building illegal. Well, now Israel insisting the U.S. government, it says, was behind that controversial resolution, though the White House has been denying that. Ambassador John Bolton, writing in the Wall Street Journal, said this, quote, "Last Friday, on the eve of Hanukkah and Christmas, Barack Obama stabbed Israel in the front. The departing president refused to veto United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334, a measure ostensibly about Israeli settlement policy, but clearly intended to tip the peace process toward the Palestinians. Its adoption wasn't pretty, but sadly, it was predictable." John Bolton joins us now. He is, of course, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and a Fox News contributor. Ambassador, is it really fair to say that President Obama stabbed Israel? I mean, look, supporters of the resolution say the settlements are illegal. Israel continues to defy and violate international law. The Netanyahu government is provocative and is torpedoing any hope of a two-state solution with this continued settlement construction.
Well, that is the Palestinian line, and but no U.S. administration has flatly called the settlements illegal before. They have said it's politically not helpful and the rest. But I think the real trouble with Resolution 2334 is that it implicitly repeals the well-known Resolution 242 adopted by the Security Council after the 1967 war between Israel and the Arab states nearby, that created the doctrine known as land for peace, that Israel, after 67 and then after the 73 war, would give back land that it had taken in battle in exchange for peace. So, for example, the Camp David peace agreement of 1979 with Egypt, Israel basically gave back that part of the Sinai Peninsula it had taken in the 73 war and got the Camp David peace agreement. What people are now arguing is that that is invalid, that the remaining territories that Israel once occupied after these wars really are not in its power to give back, so that Israel has to give in to borders that 242 flatly said were not defensible and not secure. And there's a lot of back and forth about the language of the resolutions, but the fact is this is an extraordinarily radical step by an outgoing American president intended to box in his successor.
And what does it mean if the 67 borders do not hold?
Well, the 67 borders are really the 1949 truce lines and the agreements that reflect where the parties, the military units stood when the ceasefire was declared in 1949. And these ceasefire agreements all say the line is based purely on military considerations. They're not intended to be political settlements. The idea is, and this too has been fundamental to American foreign policy, Democratic and Republican administration alike, for decades now, almost 50 years, the parties to the conflict in the Middle East themselves must work it out. This resolution was intended to, the Obama administration intended it would, put a thumb on the scales heavily in the Palestinians' favor. And again, doing it with a month left in office, fully intending to have an effect that would preclude the incoming Trump administration from doing a number of things it signaled in the campaign it would do.
And what does this mean for the prospect of peace? This has, of course, been going on for decades. I mean, David Friedman, who the president-elect has nominated as the new Israeli ambassador, he's a staunch supporter of the settlements, apparently gives money and fundraisers for them in tunes of millions of dollars. Is the two-state solution dead? You have written about what you call the three-state solution. Can you explain that? And do you think the status quo with this resolution, with the Trump administration, is going to be thrown out the window and pursue, as you call it, the three-state solution?
Well, I think the two-state solution died a long time ago. It was never workable, and it's certainly not going to work in present circumstances where you have the terrorist group Hamas in control of the Gaza Strip and elements of the Palestinian Authority still engaged in terrorism themselves. I think what you ought to think of is what's best for the Palestinian people here, consistent with Israel's security needs. And I think the answer is not to conjure up some imaginary state that won't even have its pieces connected with one another and which has no hope of economic viability. Instead, take these territories, give the Gaza Strip back to Egypt, give whatever part of the West Bank Israel is willing to cede to Jordan, connect the Palestinian people to real economies, and try and go on from there. This is a very difficult alternative because neither Jordan or Egypt want the Palestinian territories, which is a sad commentary on 50 years of anti-Israel activity in the region. But looking at this concretely, the two-state solution is simply not viable. If you don't like my three-state solution, fine, come up with an alternative. But beating your head against the wall continuously for the two-state solution mantra is not going to get us anywhere.
Ambassador John Bolton, certainly the status quo in for a shaking up of some sort. Thank you for your insight and analysis.
Thank you, Eric.
Of course. Patty Ann?
Well, Eric, frightening moments on board a packed airliner. What caused this plane to skid off the runway moments before takeoff?
And millionaires and billionaires could fill some key roles in the president-elect's cabinet. How their wealth could complicate the Senate confirmation process. Well, a Jet Airways airplane skidding off the runway today in India, and it injured several people. It is an Indian airline, and that flight getting ready to take off when it veered off track, went off the runway and right into the grass. 12 people were hurt as crews evacuated the airplane. There is no word, though, exactly what caused that plane to basically drive right off the runway.
President-elect Trump is putting together one of the wealthiest cabinets in history, and vetting the nominees' financial holdings could slow down the confirmation process. Some of the richest picks include Deputy Commerce Secretary nominee Todd Ricketts, who is worth an estimated $5.3 billion. Many more of the nominees have tens of millions of dollars. They will all have to report their assets and make sure there are no conflicts of interest. Joining us now, Steve Moore, the economic advisor for President-elect Trump's Transition Committee, also a distinguished visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation and a Fox News contributor. Nice to see you, Steve.
Hi, Patty Ann. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those millionaires and billionaires. I'm trying, but I'm not there yet. But look, I don't actually get what this whole dispute or controversy is about. I mean, Donald Trump made it very clear during the campaign he was going to bring in very talented people, people who were men and women of accomplishment, people who were financially successful to sort of drain the swamp and run a government on a pay-as-you-go basis. We're running trillion-dollar deficits, and I think that's actually one of the reasons that the American people voted for Trump, is they wanted, look, the federal government, Patty Ann, is a $4 trillion enterprise. It's the largest entity in terms of spending of any institution in the entire world. Why not have people who know what they're doing running these agencies?
Yeah, Mr. Trump has so far appointed 5 billionaires and 6 multimillionaires. And as you're pointing out, critics are unhappy about that, especially possible ties to Wall Street, et cetera.
Well,
but as an economic advisor to Trump, as you say, this is a part of the strategy. Get people who know how to manage large amounts of money. But it does complicate confirmation proceedings.
Yeah.
These nominees have to disclose their financial holdings. They have to shed assets that might present a conflict of interest. How difficult and time-consuming might this be, and is it possible that some nominees will be disqualified?
No, I don't think so. And look, it is difficult. You have to go through all your financial records, and you have to disclose everything. And by the way, that's appropriate, Patty Ann. We want the people who are running our federal agencies and the federal government to disclose any potential conflicts of interest they have. That's including Donald Trump himself. But that should not be disqualifying. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is, if we say that people who are successful in business or finance are not able to be in government, then we're going to run trillion-dollar deficits for as far as the eye can see. It's time to get managers in here who know what they're doing, who know how to meet a payroll, who know how to run a business. I mean, we are literally borrowing, over $1 billion a day right now. You can't keep that up as a great nation.
Yeah, and the thing is, these folks who do accept these nominations do it at personal sacrifice. In 2009, multimillionaire Stephen Ratner was appointed to the Treasury. The Wall Street Journal says he had to spend $400,000 just on legal fees to deal with these complicated financial implications, and others actually declined to serve because of the divestiture and disclosure process. But even Ratner admits, he says, look, I don't think the government's out to torture you. He says the government is out to prevent a conflict of interest, so it's a necessary evil. But any way to simplify it going forward?
Well, I'd love to see that happen. But look, the other point that I think is important is who has been running these agencies for the last 10, 12, 15, 20 years. They've traditionally been lawyers and lobbyists and special interest groups and so on who don't always have the American taxpayers' interest at stake. And I love the idea. I mean, look, my idea is, how about this, Patty? And let's get Fred Smith, who runs FedEx, one of our great companies. Let's get him to do a full audit of everything the government does and find out where there's waste in the budget and root that stuff out. I mean, there's $160 billion a year, according to the federal government's own auditors, of false payments that go to people who are not eligible for food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. I mean, my goodness, why, when we're running these large deficits, why can't we get rid of that waste? I mean, it's incredible.
It's a good question. But also, as I mentioned, and you were nodding your head, it's a money-losing proposition for a lot of these people. You can almost argue that that makes them less likely to be corrupt. They have millions and billions of dollars, and the only reason they would choose to serve and lose a lot of money in the process is because they genuinely want to help, because at some point you don't even need any more money, right?
Well, I guarantee you, my friend Wilbur Ross, who's taking over as the Commerce Secretary, is going to take a big pay cut to do this. He's a billionaire, and he's going to take probably a 98% pay cut to do this. So I think these are people who just have America's best interest at stake. They understand we're in a rut right now, and we'll see whether this works out. But, there's so many talented people who run American business. I mean, why not get people like Bill Gates and people like Warren Buffett in, who can really show how you, as my mother used to say, manage your P's and Q's, Patty Ann, and that's something never happens in government.
Well, Steve Moore, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Well, President Obama, Patty Ann, pointing fingers in one of his final interviews as president. And he's pointing the finger at Fox News for his negative approval ratings with conservatives. Is he right? We'll take a look at that.
And a hoax that quickly went viral. Why record label executives had to rush out and tell everyone Britney Spears is still alive, folks. Alive and well. A big Christmas snowstorm causing holiday travel problems in the northern plains states, and now the winter weather is moving east. Officials telling people to stay off the roads in North Dakota, where several highways had to be closed. That state seeing as much as 18 inches of snow in some areas. And Janice Dean is live now in the Fox Weather Center to tell us where the storm is heading next. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Patty. And the good news is the storm is weakening, but look at the cold front associated with it, where we have very warm air ahead of this front, colder air behind it. Look, it's 57 right here in New York City. It is warmer than it is in Dallas. It's warmer than it is in El Paso. It's warmer than it is Albuquerque. So you get the picture. All of that warmth from the south is moving northward ahead of this cold front. The storm itself is weakening, which is great news. We still have a wintry mix across northern New England, but just sort of a scattered rain event for portions of the southeast and the mid-Atlantic. Our next storm system moving into the northwest, where we have unsettled weather for much of the new work week. But I want you to pay close attention to this next storm system as we get into Thursday and Friday, because we're expecting a nor'easter. But depending on the temperature, that will mean either it's going to be an all rain event, a mixture of the two, or an all snow event. So this is 2 p.m. on Thursday. So we're watching New England. You could actually get some heavy snow with this. And again, depending on the temperature, will that mean snow for maybe New York City? So 57 today. We're going to drop things dramatically in the next 12 to 24 hours with a high of 41 tomorrow. And we'll have to see what happens Thursday and Friday. Will it be too warm for a snow event? So that's going to be our next big storm system they're going to watch that could present some travel delays. There are your highs today. 57 in New York, 70 in Raleigh, 70 in Atlanta. So we've got that warm air ahead of the cold front, cooler air behind it. But look at the 24-hour temperature change. So this is quite dramatic. 23-degree difference between what it was yesterday and what it is today. 29 right now in Caribou, Maine. So that you can see where that cold front is here on the move, and a little bit warmer across the northwest as well. Quick look at your forecast temperatures. We're going to drop those temperatures this week, Wednesday, Thursday. But as we get that low pressure off the coast, depending on what the temperature is going to be, it's going to be a difference between either rain, snow, or a mixture of the two. So, Patty Ann, that's going to be the big deal as we head into Thursday. And then maybe another storm for New Year's Eve.
Oh, boy.
We'll be busy in the Fox News Extreme Weather Center. Back to you.
That's for sure. Janice Dean, thanks as always.
Of course.
Well, President Obama is still at it, calling out Fox News, in part, for the backlash against him from conservatives. Listen to the latest thing he said.
There's this thing in us, there's this thing in this country that is good and unifies us and ultimately will win out. I would argue that, in part, very cynically, somebody like a Mitch McConnell or Roger Ailes at Fox News, I think, specifically mobilized a backlash to this vision.
Well, is he correct? Tim Carney is a commentary editor for the Washington Examiner. Richard Goodstein, Democratic strategist and former Clinton advisor. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Tim, let me start with you. I mean, look, Fox News for years has been on his and the administration's mind. Anita Dunn, remember that in 2010? She was blaming Fox News. The president recently also said part of the problem, in his view, is that Fox News is on in every bar and restaurant in parts of the country, and he is still on this theme. Why do you think he is so bugged?
I think he goes to the worst bars and restaurants in America. Nothing against Fox News, but I'd rather be watching the Giants or the Mets when I'm in a bar or restaurant than you guys. But I think he's on this theme in part because he can't find any explanation for why the country isn't rallying behind him. I think he's drank his own Kool-Aid. He believes in hope and change. And the fact that he was able to win 2 elections but not bring the country with him, that he destroyed his party as far as the congressional, the state, the governor levels, that he wasn't able to pass anything through Congress after his first couple of years. I think he literally is shocked the rest of the country hasn't come along with him, and he's looking for a vast right-wing conspiracy to blame.
So you're saying he's not personally introspective, or he's not personally willing to take responsibility because of some of his policies?
He lacks a skill I try to teach my 10, 8, and 6-year-old, which is don't always blame somebody else when something goes wrong.
Richard, is he doing that?
So it's kind of a mixed bag. He leaves office with almost historically high. The person he backed for president won by almost 3 million votes among all the voters, and there were more Democrats that cast votes for the Senate. There were, Democrats picked up 2 seats in the Senate, 6 seats in the House. So this notion that it was this repudiation of Barack Obama is fiction. We will hear this fiction every day for the next 4 years at least, but it's a fiction. Now, the fact of the matter is, what Tim said is right. The Democratic Party is not nearly as strong today as it was. You can't deny, though, and all the data shows that people who watch Fox News, don't take it from me or Democrats, Bruce Bartlett, who was a Reagan and Bush 1 advisor in the Treasury Department, said that viewers engage in self-brainwashing. That's why they believe there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's why they believe Barack Obama was born in Kenya.
The Bush administration, the United Nations and the Bush administration, in dealing with the weapons of mass destruction, and Hans Blix told me, that they believe that there was. But I mean, when you're dealing with the policies and you're dealing with these issues, and we cover them in a fair, balanced way, like both you two guys, right now, is it really fair for the president to say he's been made a fictional character that some people have believed, and he's not looking at the policies that have cost the Democrats, for example, a tremendous loss in the Senate seats, the state legislatures across the country, and this sort of thing?
Look, I think he will indeed engage in introspection when he's done office. This is not the time to do it. But let me use one illustration. The Trump tweet about his foundation is a fiction about him giving money to charities when he's paying for portraits of himself, and his own Trump Foundation, it says they engage in illegal self-dealing. That's not something, frankly, Eric, I've heard reported on this network.
Oh, we certainly have many times. I've reported that many times, Richard. That's not true at all.
About the self-dealing? About the self-dealing?
Yes, about using other people's money, allegedly. I'll tell you who it was. It was a police foundation in New Jersey giving some money. We've reported that many times, and there's a lot about that, you know, on this channel. So, I mean, you can pick and choose. I mean,
I think that Fox has provided a good level of skepticism towards Barack Obama. I hope that Fox, and I expect that Fox will provide that same skepticism towards Donald Trump. But what we're seeing now is the rest of the media suddenly saying, well, nowadays we need to go and we need to challenge and we need to hold the government accountable. We just had an editorial at the Examiner where we said, yes, welcome, please hold Donald Trump accountable. But it would have been nice had you not taken something of a vacation for the last 8 years where Barack Obama was able to get away with fooling the American people and misleading them. But the fact is, I don't think
fairness,
he did fool them very much.
There's a lot of negative commentary about the president's policies, about the expense of Obamacare and the rates going up, you know, and this sort of thing, and the utter complete failures in Syria that have caused this unbelievable humanitarian catastrophe that many analysts believe, and rightly so, have been a stain on the Obama legacy. Finally, and I'll stop now, Richard, I mean, what would your advice be to President Obama as he, you know, goes off and sits there and clicks through Fox News and MSNBC and CNN? Yeah. I mean, what are you going to tell him?
His point would be, yes, there's the focus on the rates going up in some states for Obamacare, not on the 20 million people who've gotten health care that didn't have it before. Look, the fact of the matter is, what happened in 2000 is the Democrats started think tanks and so forth to counter Heritage and other conservative think tanks. I wonder whether Barack Obama will be behind some effort to kind of promote media efforts that he thinks the Democrats are lacking in. Look, he tips his hat to Fox News. Believe me, this is something that any network would like to have, having a president kind of attribute his weakness to the network. And I think he will give a lot of thought to doing something that Democrats can stand up to counter that.
Tim, quickly, your advice.
I think that Barack Obama has not done a good job rallying the public. I don't think he will. What I always thought he would be great at would be being a liberal columnist. I think he should go to work for the New Republic, or frankly, submit some op-eds to the Washington Examiner. I think he's a really smart guy.
Just you can call in at the editorial part of FoxNews.com, and I'm sure that we will accept one of his editorials wholeheartedly. Tim and Richard, good to see you. Thanks so much. Thank you for appearing on Fox News.
Sure.
Patty Ann.
And by the way, we did cover that self-dealing accusation yesterday on this very show, and we're covering it again in the very next block. So stay tuned. President Obama and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe are touring the Pearl Harbor Memorial together today. We'll have a live report on that historic visit.
And President-elect Donald Trump, well, he is lashing out at the media. Man, you just can't get a break from both sides, can you? Well, he's announced that he will close his foundation. And yes, Fox News is reporting, examining, investigating, looking at what he did and did not do that was correct or incorrect in dealing with that alleged self-dealing and the portrait and all that other stuff at the Trump Foundation that he says he will now close, but is still under investigation by the Attorney General of New York State.
President-elect Donald Trump is firing back at the media after announcing he'll close his foundation to avoid any conflict of interest issues. He says the media is not reporting on all of his charitable giving. He tweeted, quote, "I gave millions of dollars to DJT Foundation, raised or received millions more, all of which is given to charity, and media won't report. And the DJT Foundation, unlike most foundations, never paid fees, rent, salaries, or any expenses. 100% of money goes to wonderful charities." So joining us now, Caitlin Huey-Burns, the national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning.
So much of what Trump says there in his tweet is technically correct, according to the Washington Post, which says that over the years, since the 1980s, he has in fact given $7.8 million to the foundation that they can verify. But they also note that that is actually a pretty small amount for covering decades for a foundation foundation from somebody of his wealth.
Exactly. And over the past decade or so, he hasn't given any money to the charity and instead has spent the money that has been given by others and spent it on things, as the Washington Post has reported over the past several months, that benefit himself. We know about that infamous painting, the Tim Tebow collector's item, and those sorts of things. He also, as my colleague at Real Clear Politics has reported, used that donations to further his own political ambitions, donating to various political groups and such that would then benefit him later on.
Well, yeah, that's the what you mentioned. Yeah, he didn't donate anything at all, apparently, from 2008 to 2015. And as you mentioned, there are these self-dealing accusations which are being investigated right now by the New York State Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman.
Exactly.
You know, critics say it's politically motivated, but what about some of the issues in there? Taking money from the foundation to pay settlements for lawsuits related to his for-profit businesses.
Right, exactly. And just to backtrack a little bit, the reason that this is such a big deal is because Donald Trump had never released his tax returns. So there was no way of knowing and verifying these claims. And so the Washington Post really, and others, looked into this issue and found all of these things going on. And so when you're using your foundation to pay for various things that benefit you, that raises a lot of questions. And while he's trying to dissolve his foundation, he can't really do so because, as you mentioned, still under investigation by the AG. And so what this really speaks to is possibly the broader conflicts of interest with his businesses as he prepares to take the presidency, and these questions kind of still looming. So even though if he dissolves the foundation and steps away from it, these questions still exist.
You know, he is blasting the media, saying the media is not covering all of the donations that he's made. But in fact, every time he invites the media to look into his donations, you know, the Washington Post and Real Clear Politics have done several examinations where they've actually gone out and tried to verify the specific claims that he has made publicly about giving this amount to that and that amount to the other. And they have found that they are not able to substantiate most of those claims. You mentioned he hasn't released his tax returns. If he wants us to report on it, wouldn't it be helpful for him to do this?
Oh, it would be very easy to do so as well, and to verify those claims and also to release his tax returns. I don't expect that he will. What's really interesting about the reporting around the foundation that the Washington Post has done, the reporter David Fahrenhold has been very public about his reporting procedure, publishing on Twitter and other avenues saying, look, these are the exact people I've talked to, these are the foundations I've talked to, that they haven't received the money that was pledged to them, and so forth. So he's been very public about the reporting and has then provided lots of opportunities for Trump and the campaign and now the transition team to answer those questions at hand. Now you say, you can ask the question, you know, how does this matter? He was already elected when people knew about this. And in fact, a lot of his supporters would say, look, he has been generous and so forth. But again, this raises questions about how he would operate as president when he has all of his business dealings still going on, and whether the conflicts of interest surrounding the self-dealing procedures apply to those businesses.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Eric?
Well, Patty Ann, you hear about this? A Twitter hoax that targeted a major pop star with some false tweets spread around the internet that claimed about Britney Spears.
Also, a holiday surprise for a World War II veteran from Missouri. How Taylor Swift made Christmas a little more special for one of her oldest fans. Star Taylor Swift making the holidays special for one of her biggest fans. Cyrus Porter is a World War II veteran from Missouri. He's been to 2 Taylor Swift concerts along with his daughter and grandchildren. And just before Christmas, Taylor Swift showed up at his house and serenaded him with a performance of Shake It Off.
He was like dancing and just moving to the beat of what he thought was the beat of the music and having a great time with it.
I just enjoyed it. I'm getting old. I'm just going to enjoy it and everything. I just seem to go see her right now as anybody.
Well, Porter was diagnosed with cancer this year, but he says his goal is to see another Taylor Swift concert during her next tour.
That's fabulous. Go Cyrus. Well, Britney Spears, meanwhile, she's a victim of a hoax that went viral. Somebody posted tweets to Sony Music's Twitter account claiming that the pop star had died. William Lajeunesse is live in Los Angeles with more on this. So, William, I mean, some people really thought this was true?
Well, just for a few hours, Mirror Online, the website out of London, did rush to publish with the headline, "Britney Spears is dead," until later admitting the story was a hoax. But for a few hours yesterday, the world thought otherwise when someone hacked into the official Sony Music Twitter account, which sent out this announcement around 8 a.m. saying, and I'm quoting, "Rest in peace at Britney Spears," followed by a frown face, teary-eyed emoji, and the hashtag RIP Britney. Another tweet shortly after read, "Britney Spears is dead. By accident. We will tell you more soon." Well, that prompted her manager to tell reporters Britney is fine and well. A few clowns have made similar claims over the years, but never on the official Sony Music Twitter account. Britney herself posted this picture 17 hours ago showing us she is alive and well. In case you hadn't been following, she has sold 100 million albums. She is number 11 on the Twitter chart, 49 million followers, just behind Justin Timberlake, and ahead of Kim Kardashian.
I'm in. This is just it's just horrible. And it's heartless that someone would do this. Who's getting blamed for these tweets?
Well, no one has, actually, someone has taken credit, I was going to say, unless you figure the North Koreans are still angry about that Seth Rogen movie. But Sony Music said in a statement, first of all, that its social media account was compromised, and it apologizes to Britney and her fans for any confusion. So the group Our Mine claimed responsibility. It is a very effective hacker group that hacks celebrity internet accounts to, in their words, focus attention on cyber insecurity. In 2016, they hacked the Twitter accounts of the CEO of Google, the creator of Pokemon, and the founder of Wikipedia. Members of the group, for obvious reasons, remain anonymous. Bottom line, Britney Spears is alive. You can see her in Vegas.
All right,
Eric?
that's a good thing. But, man, it's really getting out of control. William, thank you. Patty Ann?
Well, tensions between the U.S. and Israel going public in the wake of that controversial UN vote. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accusing the Obama administration of a diplomatic ambush. Israel now demanding the U.S. take action to punish the United Nations. Relations between the U.S. and Israel straining at the seams following the UN vote condemning Israeli settlements in occupied territory. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Patty Ann Brown, in for Martha McCallum.
And hi, Patty Ann. And hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn, in this morning for Bill Hemmer, where Israel has been doubling down on its claims that the Obama administration did orchestrate that controversial resolution opposing Jewish settlements. Israel's ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer, now calling for his government to retaliate against the UN for that security vote and punish the United Nations.
We look forward to discussing that with the new administration and with Congress, and we think there has to be a real pushback against the UN, which has become a cesspool, not just of anti-Israel activity, but anti-American activity.
Well, Rich Edson is live now in Washington. Rich, Israel also dialing up the rhetoric against the Obama administration.
Yeah, good morning, Patty Ann. And the Israeli government is already looking forward to the next U.S. administration as President-elect Trump has criticized the United Nations over this vote. Israel says it has proof the Obama administration coordinated a resolution condemning Israel for its settlement building and says it will turn that evidence over to the Trump administration to decide how to proceed. The United States allowed that United Nations Security Council resolution to pass, abstaining from a vote, though the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and its allies see it as much more than a simple abstention.
We have disagreements inside the family on a lot of things, but as they say, friends don't take friends to the Security Council. And what really happened here is that the Obama administration basically took the steering wheel and brought it over to those Jeffersonian democracies like Venezuela, Malaysia, Senegal, to decide on Israel's fate.
The White House denies it orchestrated that vote. Deputy Press Secretary Eric Schultz says in a statement, quote, "The U.S. did not draft this resolution, nor did the U.S. introduce this resolution. The Egyptians, in partnership with the Palestinians, are the ones who began circulating an earlier draft of the resolution. The Egyptians are the ones who moved it forward on Friday, and we took the position that we did when it was put to a vote." The Obama administration says its abstention is simply reaffirming the long-standing U.S. position on settlements, Patty Ann.
Rich, and there are predictions that we might actually see more moves from the Obama administration before the president leaves office regarding this?
Yeah, before leaving office, Secretary of State John Kerry will offer the Obama administration's plan for Middle East peace. That's according to a top Obama policy aide. Administration officials have already spoken about the situation there, openly criticizing Israel for settlement building.
When we see laws that aim to legalize outposts, when we see rhetoric that suggests that this is the most pro-settlement Israeli government in history, and when we see the facts on the ground, again, deep into the West Bank, beyond the separation barrier, we feel compelled to speak up against those actions.
Though the administration has also criticized the Palestinians for the incitement of violence, the glorification of terrorists, and the growth of violent extremism, saying that erodes prospects for peace. Patty Ann.
Rich Edson, live in Washington. Thank you.
Patty Ann, Israel already says it will pull funding from some UN programs, and there are calls in our country for the United States to do the same as a result of the Security Council vote. For more on this, we're joined by Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard and a Fox News contributor. Steve, should the United Nations be punished if you do not agree with a Security Council vote?
Well, I don't think with any Security Council vote. To me, this is sort of the culmination of decades-long problems at the United Nations. I mean, the United Nations has really become a place where authoritarians go to be excused, where atrocities are often ignored, where you have United Nations doing business with people like Saddam Hussein and the Oil for Food program, giving sustenance to a regime that was struggling with its own finances. I think the United Nations has, in many respects, become more trouble than it's worth for the United States.
I mean, there certainly has been a failing of the international order. I mean, you got ISIS, terrorist attacks, the horror of what happened in Syria. I mean, civilians killed on a mass scale. I mean, all of this are the very issues that the United Nations was established to address and hopefully solve, to, quote, promote international peace and security. I mean, this is the first resolution at the UN, at the Security Council, that's been passed in like 7 or 8 years.
Right. I mean, there's been this obsession at the United Nations with Israel. I mean, a targeting of Israel over the years. The United States has often, I think, taken a role in playing defense for Israel or with Israel against some of the more spurious and specious charges leveled against it by regimes that in many cases are rogue regimes. But, you know, what the UN has done in many respects is not just accommodate some of these rogue regimes, authoritarian regimes, dictatorships, countries, nations, governments that have dictated or have killed their own people. In many cases, they've given the United States and leaders that ought to act an excuse for not doing so, because United States leaders of other Western countries can say, well, the United Nations is addressing this, and you know there will be some grave concerns expressed and some letters written and maybe a debate at the Security Council. All the while, you have people suffering or struggling, and I would point to Syria certainly as one prime example of this.
President-elect Trump really criticized the UN in a tweet. Let me read it to you, what he said. The UN has such great potential, but right now it's just a club for people to get together, talk, and have a good time. So sad. But I mean, is that really fair, Steve? Look, the World Food Program feeds 80 million people a day, 20 million of them children. The refugee programs house at least 2 million, if not more. UNICEF has eradicated polio in some parts of the world. They have, inoculate children, and it keeps millions of people alive. It is the only hope, the only humanitarian hope for many of these people. So is it really, fair to trash, the national security part of it in the Security Council when, on a humanitarian basis, they are, many supporters say, doing good work?
Yeah, I don't think the argument is that the United Nations doesn't do any good. I think that clearly, as you suggest, it does. The question is whether the good that it does outweighs the challenges, outweighs the difficulties that it presents. And I think in this era of increasing globalization, there are other means by which you could address some of those problems that you point to. And I think the question is whether you can strengthen other alliances, if you're incoming President Donald Trump, where the interests more clearly align with the United States. I mean, you don't have, for instance, you don't want Syria on the UN UN Human Rights Council. It makes no sense. I mean, there's so many examples of this kinds of behavior over the years at the United Nations that really almost makes a mockery. It's a self-mockery of the institution. I think the question is, can you can you address some of those problems in better alliances that are better suited to address those problems more directly without the UN bureaucracy, and that don't present the additional problems that the United Nations so often presents, while the United States, by the way, is picking up a quarter of the tab.
Yeah, you know, we pay 22% of the budget, about $3 billion a year. By the way, I wrote a book about all this called The UN Exposed, How the United Nations Sabotages America's Security and Fails the World. I wrote this in 2006, and I have to tell you, Steve, I'm really so regretting, I'm so sad that it continues. All you have to do is look at Syria. You see these failings despite some of the good that it does. So when you talk about new alliances, you know, what do we do? Where do we go? Can the UN be rehabilitated?
Yeah, I mean, look, you could write a paperback version, right? Time for a paperback version with a big epilogue, more reporting on there. I think the examples since 2006 have only gotten worse. I mean, you know well, Eric, from your reporting on the oil for food scandal, exactly what unfolded there, and you know, it was the knowing compliance, I think, of UN officials with Saddam Hussein's Iraq, understanding fully what was happening there, that made it the tragedy that it was. And again, that's one example. There are many, many others, and you know, you have to start to question whether this institution serves the purposes that it was intended to serve. And I think we've reached with this resolution a new point in all of this. I mean, you have conservative internationalists like Lindsey Graham questioning whether the United Nations really serves much purpose anymore, whether the United Nations, whether the U.S. should be providing funding to the United Nations. That's a new moment, I think, in this whole debate over the United Nations and what it does.
Yeah, you know, Kofi Annan even said that they have too often failed in their expectations and have just been discussing issues that are of no interest beyond the building. In the book, by the way, finally I wrote that the problem is to let everybody in. 192 nations, right. I mean, that have, many of them, as you rightfully pointed out, oppose the values upon what it was founded. Steve Hayes, great to see you. Thank you for your insight.
Thanks, Eric.
Of course. Patty Ann?
Well, post-holiday shoppers are left scrambling for safety after fights break out at malls across the country. This was the scene in Manchester, Connecticut, where several people were arrested. In Cleveland, Ohio, police used pepper spray to disperse large crowds after a fight there.
Running, screaming, I seen a girl get trumbled over. Like, it was scary. It was really scary, for real. Like, and it's just, like I said, it's just really sad. It's just sad.
Well, Rob Schmidt is live from our New York newsroom with more on this. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Patty Ann. Yeah, there were huge crowds and brawls all over the country. Texas, Tennessee, New York, New Jersey, many other locations as malls were packed with people looking to venture out of the house on the day after Christmas. At a mall in Elizabeth, New Jersey, the sound of a chair being slammed into the floor sent shoppers into a panic.
A small fight erupted, at which time someone slammed a chair down, causing a loud noise. Another patron yelled, "Shots fired," or "gun." At that time, pandemonium happened.
And people go running. Around 8 people were hurt there in New Jersey. People screaming "shots fired" added to the chaos during a fight at a mall on Long Island as well, sending customers running for the exits. Many malls were packed yesterday, and crowd size may have led to some of the problems. The Fox Valley Mall in Aurora, Illinois was evacuated after a huge crowd of teens, about 1,000 people strong, all met up, and fights began to break out amongst them. The situation escalated when some teens began throwing bottles of water and Gatorade from upper levels of the mall down onto the levels below. A police sergeant was punched in the face. 4 juveniles were arrested. Patty Ann.
Well, Rob, it seems quite coincidental that so many fights happened across the country on the same day. There are some rumors that this was all orchestrated for social media.
Yeah, you know, that was the first thing we thought, too. When we saw all of these fights start popping up, we heard about the first one last night on Long Island at about 6 o'clock. And at this time, these don't appear to be collectively coordinated. Possibly just a bizarre coincidence they all happened at the same time. At least 2 individual fights, though, may have been coordinated online individually. That fight outside Cleveland, Ohio that you showed in the toss, and this one in Aurora, Colorado, which happened at the Town Center Mall. About 500 teens swarmed the food court, and fighting began when officers came in to take control of the situation. One officer said he was surrounded by an unruly crowd, and that's when the decision was made to shut down that mall and evacuate. There were 5 arrests there. No mall customers or police officers were hurt. Many places were closed for the official observance on a weekday of Christmas. So the mall was one of the few places people could go, and a lot of people wanted to get out of the house. So most malls were very busy, people looking to return those gifts they don't want, looking for those after Christmas sales. We'll send it back to you.
2 words, internet shopping.
That's right.
Rob Schmidt, thank you very much.
Well, he wasn't on the ballot, but President Obama says he could have won a 3rd term if he ran again. And as you might guess, President-elect Donald Trump, well, he's got something to say about that. Coming up, we'll talk to Karl Rove about all this.
Also, Boeing has a multi-billion-dollar deal to build planes for Iran, but one Iranian official says the planes are worth half that. Are they about to try to take advantage?
And Democrats gearing up for a big fight on Capitol Hill. Will they be the party of no, or can the Trump administration push past that?
I wear their opposition as a badge of honor because it means I'm fighting for real change, not just partisan change where everybody else gets rich.